I went to surprise my surrogate with a baby gift. Then I saw my husband holding her hand. He kissed her and whispered, "She still has no idea." So I hired someone, found the bank statements, and cut them both off before the... That sentence stayed in my head longer than the kiss did. She still has no idea. At first, I didn't even understand what I was seeing. My brain kept trying to protect me from it. I sat in my car across from the clinic, holding a little gift bag with a stuffed bear inside, telling myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe Hope was scared. Maybe Dean was comforting her. Maybe I had misunderstood the way his hand rested on her lower back like it belonged there. Then he leaned down and kissed her on the mouth. Not quickly. Like a man kissing the woman he came home to when he was done lying to his wife. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. I remember the gift bag tipping over on the passenger seat. The little bear fell halfway out, one button eye staring at me like even it knew I had been stupid. I didn't make a scene in the parking lot. I just sat there while they got into his car and drove away, and something inside me went completely still. By the time I got home, I had stopped crying before I even started. For years, all I wanted was a baby. It started as something hopeful. Dean and I talked about names while folding laundry. We saved nursery photos. We joked about who the baby would look like. Then hope turned into calendars, tests, blood work, and doctors saying words that sounded gentle but landed like stones. The first miscarriage broke my heart. The second one made me afraid of my own body. The third one changed me in a way I still don't know how to explain. After that, pregnancy did not feel like a dream anymore. It felt like a room I kept walking into just to watch the lights go out. One night, I told Dean I couldn't keep doing it. I was sitting on the bathroom floor, exhausted from shots and appointments and pretending I was okay. He sat beside me and held my hand while I said, "I can't do this anymore. I feel like my body keeps taking everything from me." He looked devastated. Or I thought he did. He told me I was not broken. A few weeks later, he brought up surrogacy. I was scared of the cost. I was scared of hoping again. I was scared of putting my heart in someone else's body and trusting the world not to destroy it. Dean kept saying this was our chance. He said we had savings. I wanted to believe that so badly. Then he came home one evening and said he had found someone. Her name was Hope. He told me she was connected through someone he knew. Young, healthy, kind, going through money problems, and willing to be a surrogate for less than what an agency would charge. He said she didn't want the cold agency process. She wanted to help a couple directly, and we could help her too. I hesitated right away. I asked, shouldn't we go through an agency? Dean had an answer ready. He said the clinic would handle the medical side, and he would deal with the appointments and forms so I didn't have to keep reliving the worst parts of everything. That should have been the moment I paused. Instead, I thanked him. Because grief makes trust feel like relief. When someone you love says, "Let me carry this part for you," you don't always ask why they are so eager to take it out of your hands. The first time I met Hope, she seemed nervous but sweet. She was soft-spoken, with big eyes and a careful smile. I remember thinking her name felt like a sign. Hope. That embarrasses me now. The papers came soon after. Dean brought them home in a folder with printed clinic information, consent forms, payment summaries, appointment schedules, and legal-looking pages that explained expectations and boundaries. He told me not to overwhelm myself with details because the clinic had the official copies. These were just for our records. I signed what he asked me to sign. Not blindly, exactly. I read enough to see what I expected to see. Intended parents. Surrogate expenses. Medical privacy. Compensation. It all sounded real because I needed it to be real. Hope became pregnant, or at least that was what Dean told me after one of the early appointments. He came home with a printed ultrasound image and tears in his eyes. He said, "It worked." I held that picture like it was made of glass. For the first time in years, I let myself imagine a baby again. I painted the nursery a pale green because I didn't want to know the gender yet. I bought tiny socks. I kept a list of things we needed. I would sit in the nursery at night and picture a crib by the window, Dean in the doorway, a life that finally made sense after years of pain. And while I was doing that, I was also paying for Hope's life. At first, it was normal expenses. Medical copays. Prenatal vitamins. Gas money for appointments. Then it became rent because she said her housing situation was stressful. Dean told me stress was bad for the baby, and I agreed. We paid for an apartment near downtown Salem. Then groceries. Then maternity clothes. Then rides, meals, and little emergency transfers that always came with a reason. She's been nauseous all day. She needs better food. She's anxious about bills. She had to miss work. Every time I hesitated, Dean reminded me what was at stake. He never had to say it directly. He just had to look sad and mention the baby. So I paid. I paid because I thought I was protecting my child. I paid because I didn't want Hope to feel abandoned. I paid because after so many losses, I was terrified that one wrong decision would make the universe punish me again. Looking back, the red flags were everywhere. Hope didn't want me in the ultrasound room. She said having the intended mother there made her feel pressured and watched. I was hurt, but Dean told me not to take it personally. He said she was doing something huge for us, and we had to respect her emotional boundaries. So he went instead. He always came home with updates. The heartbeat was strong. The measurements looked good. The doctor was happy. Hope was tired, but everything was fine. I asked once if I could speak to the clinic directly. Dean said of course, but then he added that Hope had signed privacy forms limiting who could receive updates because she was anxious about being treated like a vessel. He said it in a way that made me feel ashamed for even asking. So I stopped asking. That is the part one keep replaying. Not because I blame myself for his lies, but because I can see how carefully he used my empathy against me. Every time I wanted reassurance, he made me feel like reassurance was selfish. Every time I wanted access, he made it sound like I was violating Hope's dignity. I tried to be patient. I tried to be good. I tried to be grateful. By the 7th month, I was living in a strange kind of half-joy. I loved a baby I had never felt kick. I cared about a woman who barely looked me in the eye. I trusted a husband who had already turned my pain into his cover story. Then I bought the bear. It was small and brown, soft enough for a newborn even though I knew babies don't really care about stuffed animals at first. I bought it because I needed something real in my hands. Something I could place in the nursery and say, this is happening. That day, Hope had an appointment. Dean told me he would take her because she was nervous. I told him I understood. Then, at the last second, I decided to surprise them. I wasn't going to barge into the appointment. I wasn't going to demand anything. I just wanted to sit in the waiting room and give Hope the bear afterward. I wanted to say thank you in person. I wanted to feel included for once. So I parked across the street. I saw them come out maybe 20 minutes later. Dean opened the door for her, but before they reached the car, Hope stopped and said something I couldn't hear. He smiled at her. Not polite. Not supportive. Intimate. Then he took her hand. My body knew before my mind did. He leaned close. She laughed softly. His hand moved to the small of her back. Then he kissed her. After the kiss, he said something near her ear. I was close enough to hear just part of it through my cracked window. She still has no idea. Hope smiled. That smile did something to me. I drove home in a kind of trance. I don't remember stopping at lights. I don't remember turning onto our street. I remember putting the gift bag on the kitchen table and staring at it until the room got dark. Dean came home later and acted normal. He kissed my forehead. He said the appointment went great. He showed me another printed ultrasound and said, look at that little face. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at him. For 1 second, I wanted to ask him how he could stand there and breathe. Instead, I said, that's good. The next morning, I hired Mark. I found him through a quiet referral from someone at work. I told him I thought my husband was having an affair with the surrogate. Even saying the words made me feel insane. He didn't react like it was insane. He just asked for names, dates, payment records, and anything Dean had given me. Within a week, Mark called and said we needed to meet in person. I knew before I got there. Nobody says in person when the news is small. His office was plain and smelled like old coffee. He handed me a folder and explained everything carefully, but my brain kept catching on only a few words at a time. Hope was not connected through Dean's cousin or a friend of a friend. She had met Dean at a coffee shop near his office. They had been seeing each other for almost 2 years. There had never been a clinic transfer. The documents Dean gave me were forged. The pregnancy was natural. The baby was Dean's and Hope's. I made it to the trash can before I threw up. Mark waited quietly. He did not try to comfort me with empty words. When I could sit again, he showed me photos, timelines, messages he had been able to document legally, and financial connections that made my stomach turn. Dean had not just cheated. He had built a system around it. He used my infertility, my grief, and my desire to be a mother to convince me to fund the woman he had gotten pregnant. The rent, the groceries, the clothes, the appointment costs, the little transfers, all of it. I had spent over $80,000 protecting what I thought was my future. I was paying for his second family. That night, I did not sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with every folder spread out in front of me. The fake clinic papers, bank transfers, credit card statements, rent receipts, screenshots, photos of Dean touching Hope like she was the wife and I was the sponsor. At some point, the shock burned away and left something colder behind. I called Jill the next morning. She was the kind of lawyer who did not waste words. I sat in her office and told her everything. When I was done, she asked if I had moved any money yet. I said no. She told me not to make emotional decisions and then walked me through what I could do safely. That mattered. Because I wanted to empty every account. I wanted to burn his life to the ground in one afternoon. But Jill made it clear that if I wanted to win, I had to be controlled. So I got controlled. Under her guidance, I moved exactly half of our joint savings into an account Dean could not access. I canceled the credit card in my name that Hope had been using for baby expenses. I stopped automatic transfers tied to her rent and sent every record to Jill. I copied files, secured my personal documents, changed passwords, and packed slowly when Dean wasn't home. I did not confront him until everything was ready. On a Tuesday evening, he came home carrying takeout like we were still married in the same universe. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a manila folder in front of me and 2 suitcases by the hall closet. He noticed the suitcases first. "What's going on?" he asked. I slid the folder across the table. "Read it before you react." It was cruel, maybe, using the same kind of calm voice he had used on me for months. But I wanted him to feel the floor disappear slowly. He opened the folder. At first, his face was confused. Then he saw the photo of him kissing Hope outside the clinic. Under it was a payment breakdown. Rent, groceries, transfers, credit charges, medical receipts. Over $80,000. His face went gray. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. I said, "Tell me which part is wrong." He swallowed hard. "Rose, listen to me." "No. Tell me which part is wrong." He looked back down at the folder. His hands were shaking. He started with denial, but it lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then he switched to panic. He said it got complicated. He said he never meant for it to become this. He said he was afraid to lose me. He said he thought if there was still a baby, maybe somehow I could love the baby and we could be a family. That was the moment I almost broke. Not because I believed him, but because I realized how completely he had erased me from my own life. In his mind, my pain was just a problem to solve. My consent was optional. My money was available. My grief was useful. I asked, "Did you think I would raise your child with her and thank you for it?" He cried harder. "I love you." I looked at him and felt nothing warm. "You loved what I paid for." He dropped into a chair and put his head in his hands. He said Hope was scared. He said the baby was innocent. He said we could talk after everyone calmed down. I stood up. "The cards are canceled. The transfers are stopped. Her rent is due in 3 days. He stared at me like I had just become a stranger. I said, "You should call her." Then I walked out. I wish I could say leaving felt powerful. It didn't. It felt like walking away from a house fire while knowing half of me was still inside. The nursery was the hardest part. I had packed my clothes, documents, and a few things that mattered, but I left the nursery mostly untouched. I couldn't take the bear. I couldn't take the tiny socks. I couldn't even look at the green walls without feeling sick. That room had been the last place where I believed in him. Now the house is being prepared for sale. Jill is handling the legal side. Dean is furious sometimes and pathetic other times. He sends messages through lawyers now because I blocked him everywhere else. He wants to frame it as an affair that spiraled, but Jill is going after the money he used under false pretenses. She says the forged documents and payment records matter. She says his biggest mistake was thinking grief makes someone permanently weak. Hope to get an eviction notice after the payment stopped. I know that because Amy, one of our mutual friends, called me and told me. Amy said she was disgusted by Dean. She said what he did was unforgivable. Then her voice softened, and I knew what was coming before she said it. "She's 8 months pregnant, Rose." I said nothing. Amy continued, "I'm not saying you owe Dean anything. But the baby didn't do anything. Maybe you could have waited until after the birth to cut off the money." I asked her if she was offering to pay Hope's rent herself. She got quiet. That conversation has been bothering me more than I want to admit. Because I know the baby is innocent. I know pregnancy is scary. I know Hope is young, and maybe Dean lied to her too at first. But she knew enough to stand outside that clinic, let him kiss her, and smile when he said I had no idea. She accepted money from me while knowing I thought she was carrying my baby. She let me buy her food, clothes, and security while I was mourning children I never got to hold. So no, I do not feel responsible for keeping her comfortable in the life they built from my pain. But I am not made of stone either. Some nights, my new apartment is so quiet I can hear the refrigerator hum from the other room. I sit on the couch with a blanket around me, and I think about the baby. Not as mine. I know better now. But as a real child who will one day be born into the wreckage of what Dean and Hope did. That part hurts in a different way. I mourn a baby who never existed the way I thought they did. I mourn the version of myself who picked paint colors and folded tiny clothes with trembling hands. I mourn the marriage I thought I had. I mourn the years I spent trusting a man who was studying me for weak spots. But underneath all that grief, something steadier is growing. I survived it. Dean thought he could use my love against me and still come home to dinner. He thought I would be too broken to question paperwork, too desperate to check bank records, too ashamed to fight back. He thought my need to be a mother would make me easy to control. He was wrong. I do not know what happens next. The divorce is not finished. The money is not recovered yet. The house still has to sell. Some friends have chosen sides, and some are pretending there are no sides because it makes them feel better. I am learning that betrayal does not end the day you leave. It echoes. It shows up when you find an old receipt, when someone asks if you have kids, when you wake up and forget for 2 seconds that your life has changed. But I am free. Not healed. Not yet. Free. And if that freedom came from cutting off the money that kept their lie comfortable, I can live with that. I just keep wondering if there is a line between protecting yourself and punishing everyone connected to the betrayal. Dean says I destroyed him. Hope says I abandoned her at the worst possible time. Amy says I was right to leave, but wrong to do it so suddenly. Maybe they are all just angry that I finally stopped paying for the lie. So was I wrong for cutting them off before the baby came, or did they lose the right to my mercy the moment they used my grief to fund their life?